And at 10, Springtrap. Now, this number is really meta, and that's why it's starting off the list. But this isn't a metaphorical or philosophical number as if you thought it was going to be. Springtrap has literally killed other versions of himself in the Fazbear Fright story of In the Flesh, from the 5th Fazbear Frights book Bunny Call. After Matt hadn't playtested a VR game he was working on for a few days called Springtrap's Revenge, he came back to find piles of dead Springtraps that the AI had somehow spawned in order to have something to kill. It's absolutely horrifying, and it's just plain weird. Like, why would you spawn more versions of yourself in order to have something to kill? Like, isn't that just like a paradox? Like how you physically are unable to prevent yourself from being born, since if you do, you fade out of existence, but then you can't go back and prevent it. So like, you can't stop yourself from being born, because then you can't stop yourself from being born. I mean, well, depending on what theories about time travel that you believe, whether you believe Back to the Future or Endgame. That also makes it impossible for your younger siblings to prevent you from being born, but the older ones can prevent the younger ones, because they'd still be alive before you were conceived. So watch out, Jordan. And at 9, Hudson. Hudson is the protagonist of What We Found, the 3rd story in the 8th Fazbear Frights book Gumdrop Angel. Hudson has short blonde hair with a pale beard and blue eyes. He also has straight white teeth. He has bruises and burns all over his body. He's 6'1" and skinny. Almost like me, except my teeth aren't white and I'm not 6'1", and I don't have a beard. But I have blue eyes and I'm skinny. Hudson is a security guard at the upcoming horror attraction of Fazbear's Fright. His life up to this point has been filled with nothing but tragedy. His father committed suicide and his mother remarried a man named Lewis who would physically abuse Hudson at nearly every chance he got. He also became the main target for bullies who would hold his head down while flushing a toilet. Hudson began to fail school, and instead of trying to help him, the teachers would instead call him names and tell him that he's dumb. Gotta love the public school system, am I right? The story would later reveal that Hudson's family home burned down with Lewis and his mother inside, killing them. While Hudson does burn in an oven at the end of the story, he was in essence driven there by Springtrap, who was the main antagonist of the story. So still a Springtrap victim. By the way, Hudson was also the one who set the fire that killed his mom and Lewis, so. And at 8, Jeremy. There aren't many glitch trap victims, so we can't really do one of those lists. But since Jeremy from FNAF VR was driven to suicide by Glitch Trap, who is William Afton's code form, I think it's close enough to deem a Springtrap killing. Jeremy from FNAF VR is the game tester who tested the game before Tape Girl, and is the one who Tape Girl found after he cut off his face using a guillotine paper cutter. This was thanks to William invading Jeremy's mind through the use of the VR game, which is still confusing to me, since unless you were connected in some form of Sword Art Online haptic suit, it shouldn't really be possible. We're only seeing the game with our eyes, not plugged in like the Matrix, but I don't know why I'm bothered by it. I mean, I'm literally talking about a game series where a man possessed by the spirit of a child exploded after somehow communicating while comatose, had then used his intense agony to possess a hard drive that then gets scanned to create an AI that allows this man to continue living. So I don't know why I'm getting caught up in semantics, honestly, but yeah. Jeremy. And at 7, The Arm. We don't know too much about the upcoming FNAF game Security Breach. So far we know that there are at least 5 new animatronics and a whole pizzaplex to explore, and the game will have a day and night cycle, but that AFTON will also somehow be involved thanks to the appearance of Vanny, who will serve as the antagonist to this game. However, in the gameplay trailer released for the game by PlayStation, at the very end we see a seemingly metallic arm reach out from behind some boxes. Some believe this to be the arm of the Stitch Wraith, others think that this is William. I think it's the latter, since, we can see the reflection of purple light coming off the arm, and Springtrap, aka good ol' Willie Afton, is known for being the purple guy. This combined with the fact that he's trying to escape the game indicates that he will in fact be successful, and his goal of achieving eternal or everlasting life will be complete, since now he exists as code, and can, I'm guessing, jump from animatronic to animatronic. And that's probably going to end up being a feature in the game after Security Breach, if there is one. And at 6, Charlie. Okay, so in a way, Charlie in the Twisted Ones novel is a victim of Springtrap, and by in a way, I'm gonna have to suspend my disbelief because she was still a robot. While the original Charlie was killed by William Afton, in the Twisted Ones, one of the 4 robotic versions of Charlie gets snatched by a twisted animatronic and gets killed, which only makes things more confusing when another version of Charlie, who is much older, shows up. But that's not the point. The point is that at this point, William had become Springtrap, and the twisted animatronics were his invention. So while yes, she was a robot, she was still a sentient robot who got snatched by an AFTON creation after he had become Springtrap, so that's good enough for me. This was, like I said, actually harder than I thought it was going to be. William doesn't do much killing after becoming Springtrap, because he's locked in a room for 30 years. Most of the damage was already done at that point, so please forgive a few leaps in logic or suspension of disbelief, please. Thank you. Halfway through into number 5, Springtrap and Michael. Oh yes, like I said, the only way it could get worse was if he was being shipped with a family member that he ended up causing the death of. And here we are. The Springtrap x Michael ship is one of the most horrific things I've ever witnessed. And honestly, even talking about it, I kinda wanna hurl. And before you get mad at me saying William didn't cause the death of Michael or Crying Child, yes he did. He was the one who superpowered the Fredbear animatronic and gave it the ability to crush a skull. And before you try using the whole, if someone holds your hand under a hydraulic press, it's not the person who made the hydraulic press's fault on me, okay? These two things are entirely different scenarios. In this case, this is like someone pushing me onto a fence that is labeled as a normal fence, but then someone came along and made it an electric fence without anyone knowing. In that case, the person who made the fence electric is at fault. Secondly, William, by killing people and causing his son to feel immense remorse, caused his other son to die. By killing people, he set his fate as being stuck in the FNAF 6 location, one that Michael felt the need to be at to ensure his father's destruction, which caused him to be trapped inside since Henry never provided an exit. And you wanna ship them? Knowing they're related. Y'all are in it for Henry. Henry is another case that is kind of like victim adjacent, and not in a sense where he was a victim because he killed Charlie like I said last time, but rather because Henry lets himself die in FNAF 6 in order to ensure that nobody remembers what William did. However, William does end up escaping, but Henry stayed put and let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire because of Springtrap, and then it turned out that it was all for nothing because nobody is standing in his way anymore. So honestly, while not directly killed by Springtrap or William, Henry is one of the biggest victims that William has. He took his family and his life, all for nothing, since it didn't actually put an end to his reign of terror. But maybe, like the ultimate custom night Samurai Freddy cutscene suggests, maybe Henry is also still alive, possessing an object looking to come back to keep pursuing that anime fox. At least, I wouldn't be surprised if Henry turned out to be Glamrock Freddy or something like that. Getting close to the end into number 3, Survived. After FNAF 3's ending, when we learned about the fire, we thought that that was it, at least for around 20 seconds, until people started brightening the final image like we know to do with FNAF by now. And that's when we saw Springtrap sitting in the shadows behind the stuffed animal that was the image for the news article about the fire. Now, I have no idea how the photographer didn't see that, or if William was bribing news outlets or whatever, but this is absolutely terrifying. And it really is what started us down the rabbit hole of having to jump through several hoops to find more lore clues and ideas. Brightening this one image made us have to comb through the files of a mobile game. Think about that. Anyway, this image set us on the path to thinking William survived the fire and that this would not be the last FNAF game. I don't know if this was supposed to be the point of the Easter egg, like if it was somehow to allow for more games in the series if Scott wanted to, but hey, either way, it happened. And here we are, 5 games, 15 books, and more later. Still questioning everything about this series, so time well spent. Penultimately in at number 2, Michael AFTON. Now this may be confusing to some of you since Michael doesn't die until FNAF 6, but come on, this guy is the biggest Springtrap victim of them all. Let's just recap what happens to Springtrap's own son, for God's sake. He kills his brother, assuming that's actually what happened. He then learns about his father's killing spree and tries to right his wrongs. While doing so, he is haunted by the spirits of the children his father has killed, and then learns about how his sister has possessed an animatronic after getting scooped so many years ago. Then he learns that he is probably a robot and gets ripped open by a scooping machine. After this, a giant robot amalgamation of parts fills his body and lets him bruise and rot while wearing him like a suit after Barney Stinson had a mental breakdown, and then he vomits that entire animatronic back out. Can you imagine how painful that would be? The 7-foot tall mass that is entered coming out of your throat. but somehow he's still alive. Then he finds a job posting about a new Fazbear location and applies for it, but then has to salvage animatronics that include the thing that ruined his body, his long dead sister, one of his father's earliest victims, and his father, all of which may kill him if he's not on high alert. This man has suffered probably the most in the entire series. That's absolutely horrifying. Finally, and at number 1, William Afton. Yes, here we are again. While I already said Springtrap himself as the first number, I'm gonna round it off with some more self-reflection. Like I said, this list was hard. However, the most important victim Springtrap could have had would have been William Afton himself. Let's remember, Springtrap isn't a separate character. He is the body of William Afton that got spring-locked after he hastily put on his murder costume in the back room of an early Fazbear location after accidentally releasing the souls of his original victims. Whether it was to make them feel scared or to make himself feel more powerful, his haste coupled with the moisture from the leaking ceiling caused the spring lock mechanisms to fail, shooting thousands of metal parts deep into his body. It would have killed him if not for the spirit that had possessed him that was intentionally keeping him alive. That's brutal. I mean, he absolutely deserves it, don't get me wrong, but that has to be included on this list. I mean, I was told that William should have been on the purple guy victims list, so there you go. Here he is. In at 10, Springtrap and Ballora. This is probably the most sane one out of all of these ships, but sane does not mean not cringe. First of all, Ballora and Springtrap are not married like I saw at least one comment but seemingly multiple suggest in the previous ships list. That's not a thing. They're animatronics. And there is no evidence that Ballora is possessed, either by a Mrs. Afton or literally anyone, despite the novels having the fun times be injected with the remnant of the 5 original animatronics. There's no evidence for that in the games. And while Ballora could have been created as a surrogate mother or a representation of a woman that Afton loved or couldn't have or whatever the story ends up actually being, this is still all kinds of weird. Like, what are you people doing? Bro, do you realize that this is a serial killer trapped in a robot suit? Right? Like this isn't just your old run-of-the-mill ship. In fact, none of these are. To put it into a different perspective, you're basically shipping Jeffrey Dahmer with a robot woman. You're shipping Ted Bundy with a fembot, for God's sakes. Like, does that really seem normal to you? Because it shouldn't. In at 9, Springtrap x Matt. Now, I'm not quite sure what this is shipping because there was no way in hell that I was putting that in my search history, but when I looked up Springtrap X, this was one of the suggestions, Springtrap and Matt. Now, I'm fairly certain that this is talking about the Springtrap and the Matt from the Fazbear Frights book Bunny Call, where a video game designer named Matt ends up giving birth to a real-world version of Springtrap, but a load of people guessed or assumed that this Matt was intended to be a reference to Matt Pat of Game Theory, which is honestly pretty terrifying. But now, people have begun shipping the characters, and the only reason this is higher on the list instead of lower is because this is only my suspicion, because again, there was no way in any dimension or universe that I actually clicked that suggestion. No way in living hell would I ever do that. Not if hell froze over, not if pigs could fly, not if butterflies flew out of my ass, not if a dinosaur head popped out of my butt and ate my coffee table. No, not a chance in literally any dimension. And I subscribe to the many worlds theory, much like how you should subscribe to the channel, so technically there should be a dimension where I clicked it, but not this time. No sir. And it dates Springtrap and Vanny. Now, I'd like to point out to the jury that Springtrap is a serial killer trapped inside a robot, but also that they do not exist as of Security Breach when Vanny is introduced, since at this point Springtrap has turned into Burntrap. So, for this to work, there would need to be a load of shenanigans, since for Vanny to be created, Springtrap has to become Scraptrap, and then burn in FNAF 6, releasing his soul to possess the hard drive that gets scanned into Help Wanted, that then takes over our brains as Vanessa in Help Wanted. So, for Vanny to be created, Springtrap has to die. Neither can live while the other survives, as the Harry Potter prophecy says. So, like, how on earth are we supposed to ship Springtrap and Vanny when it's literally impossible? This is why I don't like these kinds of things, okay? It makes me think, and it just seems impossible. Like, I don't want to think about the lore implications of shipping animatronics. This is all kinds of cursed, and it actually physically hurts me. I feel physical pain, like someone stabbed me. And at 7, Vanny. Vanny is the planned main antagonist of the next FNAF game Security Breach. There is not much we know about Vanny, but there are plenty of theories. Some believe Vanny to be the glitch trap controlled version of Vanessa, which would make sense. Some also believe that she was the girl who recorded the tapes in FNAF ER, aptly referred to as Tape Girl, who I literally just mentioned, which would also make sense. And while both of these are probably true, even if they aren't, somehow Vanny did fall under William's control, which in essence makes her a Springtrap victim, even if it was Glitch Trap who was controlling her. But he also would have manifested in that suit because he didn't want to relive the agony of being spring locked, so he was still basically Springtrap. Look, this was a hard list, okay? And I had to add this number at the end. I had to add it so that I had 10 points, okay? So chill for a minute and let me do my thing. And at 6, Springtrap and Golden Freddy. Now in the previous ships video I mentioned how shipping Springtrap with anyone was cringe, but specifically the original 5 animatronics, since each one are one of his victims, and a kid. Golden Freddy is no exception. Remember people, since Springtrap is the combination of Spring Bonnie and William Afton, who by all means is a real person in their reality, this means you are shipping this person with the animatronic version of Golden Freddy, which is filled with the rotting corpse of Cassidy. Cause some consider Cassidy to be the one you should not have killed, and while those who think that are wrong, that would only add yet another layer of to this already messed up ship. You people need to stop this. The only way that it could get worse was if he is shipped with a family member that he ended up causing the death of. Oh wait, yeah. It's not on this list because it was too much for a whole number, but there is also a Springtrap and Crying Child ship that I think needs to be investigated by the authorities or something, because like that's not even like daddy issues, okay? That's mental issues. Plus, again, like the Vanny thing, impossible lore-wise. Halfway through it at number 5, Survivor. The issue of how William was surviving so much was really on everyone's mind. He made it through being spring-locked, he survived 2 fires, he was really somehow the most iron-willed individual in the series, and we have no idea why, or at least we had no idea why. The main theory was that William had injected himself with Remnant, which is the molten form of metal possessed by a soul, which would have been the original 5 animatronics. This idea, from what I can tell, came from the books, since the novel version of William becomes incredibly obsessed with Remnant and trying to use it to grant himself everlasting life, like some weird kind of soul vampire, also known as a ginger. This seemed like a solid idea though, and explained away many of the random things he got through, but had one crucial flaw. The only way to destroy Remnant is with a fire, so he would have had to make it out of the FNAF 3 fire unscathed, which as we saw in Sister Location's ending, he didn't, since he was literally at the burnt down Fazbear Fright. Does anyone else find it slightly annoying that Fazbear Fright is both the name of the FNAF 3 location and the series of books revolving around like the short stories? Because I certainly do. It's very annoying. And at 4, Springtrap and Sans. You know what? I'm gonna say what I said last time I brought this up, because honestly this is worse than almost anything else on this list. Like, why are you shipping Springtrap with Sans? That's not even a character in the series, for God's sakes. That is cringe. How the ever-loving duck does that work? There are like whole Instagram accounts that I've seen revolving around this concept, and I don't know if you're joking or not. Who thought of this? What made this idea come to life? How many recreational substances were you on? Like, Sans is a 2-foot tall skeleton boy, and Springtrap is a dead serial killer who's taken more lives than years Sans has lived. Like, not really, because Sans is like 2 million years old, but that's even more weird. Like, do you see my point? The balance also is just kind of confusing. Okay, it's like someone who's like really short married to someone who's like 6 feet. It's like a 5-foot tall person being married to a 7-foot tall person. How does that even work? What? Like, Sans would need an actual ladder to have a proper conversation with Springtrap, let alone anything else. Like, not even a step ladder. Okay, you would need like an actual ladder. I wouldn't even bat an eye if they were using one of the extending ladders that fire trucks have on the top. Yeah, this is all kinds of screwy, and besides, at that scale, he's below level too, so what's the point? Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Gregory. Now, with Security Breach not releasing until late 2021, we can only speculate as to what happens to our next main character and our player, Gregory, in the next Fazbear game. However, it's entirely possible that Gregory ends up getting killed. Think about it. This is literally a kid who is fighting one of the FNAF universe's deadliest child serial killers, who has multiple animatronics out to find him and control over a security guard. Not only that, but it's entirely possible that Glamrock Freddy ends up betraying us and crushing us while we're inside of him. That sounded weird. It's not like we haven't been killed in the games before, or at least horribly mutilated like we were in Sister Location. And we as the player die in FNAF 6 along with Henry. So Scott is not new to killing off the main player in his games. But also, realistically, he's a kid. And like, what's he gonna be able to do against a literal sentient code? And if he lives, there will be someone to tell the cops what happened. And if William was paying them off, he certainly wasn't anymore, so maybe they can have an actual investigation this time. But only if Gregory lives. So he's probably gonna die. And ultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap and the Puppet. While this isn't as messed up, okay, there has been an awful amount of fan art about this ship that honestly makes me want to yak. Firstly, this is William's first victim, guys, so like, why would you ship them together? Secondly, the amount of art that I've seen where I have seen them with a baby is too much. Like a literal child, okay? People. These are robots, and one of them is a killer trapped inside of a robot with no vital human recreating organs existing. So, why are you trying to make them have babies? Please, for the love of everything that is holy, unholy, persistent, illegitimate, dark light, whatever you want to praise, for the love of it, please stop. It's wrong, it's horrifying, it's one of the most messed up things that I could think of. However, it still doesn't top our number 1 spot. And you'll see why in a minute. I can't handle this. Why? Why would you do this? This was originally going to be number 1. But I just didn't want to give the people who do ship this the satisfaction of it being on the top of a list. Because even though that would mean that it's the cringiest ship of them all, they ship the Puppet and Springtrap, so clearly they can't understand logic and they would just see number 1 and be happy. And finally, in at number 1, Springtrap X Reader. This feels like a personal attack if I'm being frankly honest, because you know what, if I read one of these I would have been the reader and I don't want that to happen. Number 1. This was the number 1 search when I looked up Springtrap X, okay, Springtrap X Reader, and I don't even want to know how that works. Like, I know how it works, but I don't want to know how someone reading a fanfic would end up falling in love with Springtrap, a literal animatronic man serial killer hybrid. What the everlasting, sweet, holy Jesus is going on with this community? These are the kinds of people who send Polaroids to serial killers who are in prison for life. I don't understand it anymore. I need to take a shower, sit on the ground, and cry for the entire weekend, because this is just what? How does one even come up with the concept for falling in love with an animatronic man hybrid? If it was Chica, I'd understand. But Springtrap, he is one of the most Rule 34 animatronics out there for seemingly no reason, because I just want death now. The fact that people are falling in love with William Afton's filleted body stuck with a bunch of robotic parts, and I can't get a girl to stick around for more than a couple days, is pretty damn ridiculous. Maybe I should like finally cave and let this series turn me into the maniac I'm probably going to become, because apparently they get all the girls. And at 9, Eternal Torment. Ultimate Custom Night was a really interesting turning point in the FNAF series. The original Afton storyline was finally at a close, and this game was the ultimate capstone to that, with some important lore hints in the form of voiced lines that play when you get killed. However, this game still fits into the FNAF story and serves as a link between the original story and the new one, the new story being Afton trying to escape the video game world that he got himself locked in. But we originally interpreted this game all wrong, since we initially thought that William was burning in hell, or at least stuck in purgatory. But as all Supernatural fans know, purgatory is just a giant forest where monsters kill each other for all eternity, not a security guard office where you have to fight off countless animatronics. But this idea, despite being solid with incredible amounts of evidence, was proven wrong thanks to the original final book in the Fazbear Fright series called Bunny Call. Wow, Scott really likes to act like he's ending things with Springtrap and then just totally doesn't. However, in this book, the story of the man in room 1280 tells the true tale of what's going on in this game. Afton is in the hospital, horrifically burned after the FNAF 6 fire, and is stuck in a coma, much like Crying Child was in FNAF 4. Eventually he wakes up though, which I'm guessing is him beating 50-20 mode, and is brought to a Fazbear warehouse where he promptly explodes and possesses a hard drive. fun. And it ain't bribery. The fact that William wasn't caught or that everything seems to go so perfectly for him has to have an explanation. It's not like this guy just got that lucky. No way, not in Five Nights at Freddy's. There has to be a reason behind why the cops didn't check inside the bleeding and horrifically smelling animatronics. We know that this is the case because the newspapers from FNAF 1 confirm that the restaurants shut down thanks to animatronics smelling like death and leaking mucus and blood. Here's a quote from one of those clippings. Police were contacted when parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. One parent likened them to reanimated carcasses. How were the bodies not found then? They could have tested the blood, found that it was similar to the parents if they didn't have any of the kids' DNA on file, and then easily have gotten a warrant to take the animatronics. But they didn't. The dead bodies were still never found and AFTON was released. How the actual hell is that possible? The only way I can see, personally, is bribery. Like, William had to have been bribing these people, and they had to know that he was locked in the back room of Fazbear Frights, because why would they tear down a random wall to find that animatronic? It's impossible. There's no way that he just got released out of random chance. No one is that lucky. No. And at 7, Springtrap and MANGLE. Springtrap and MANGLE is one of the ships that was suggested the most in the comments of cringy FNAF ships, and I can see why. Firstly, what the hell? Okay, why would you even consider these two to be a good pairing? Second, isn't MANGLE possessed by a dog? Like, didn't we settle on this? Like, William used MANGLE and Susie's dog as like a remnant experiment to see if he could actually get robots to be possessed? Or have we forgotten about that for some reason? And I mean, like, a literal animal as well. Like, not he a dog, like he's literally a dog. Like, this is borderline Beauty and the Beast kind of thing going on here. Like, what the living f are you people thinking? We're shipping a serial killer who only kills kids and a goddamn actual animal possessing an animatronic. Like, I don't know what's going on anymore. Why are we like this? This makes me want to actually leave the community and stop making FNAF videos. Like, why is this a thing? I don't want to be associated with this. So, because of that, we're moving on. And at 6, Glitch Trap. Glitch Trap is very clearly meant to be William Afton in his code form. As Tape Girl says, he was created after they scanned a hard drive they were given that was meant to help with coding the AI for the animatronics. However, while this is evidently William, it's theorized by many that this is meant to be based on the original suit that Afton wore to lure kids away, or at least try to, since thanks to the newly released Faz Facts, which I covered in detail in another video, link is in the iCard, we now know that the first animatronics William built, or at least some of the first, had claws that could hide away items, which is a feature only present in the Funtime animatronics. So the Funtimes were built before the spring-lock suits used in Fredbear's Family Diner, at least they could be. So this would have to have been a suit used at the company before they even had animatronics. And he was also planning on going on a killing spree already, so we can always assume the worst. Maybe there are more kids that went missing out of their homes like suggested in the Midnight Motors minigame. Who knows? Halfway through into number 5, Matthew. Remember how earlier I talked about how Springtrap was killing himself in the Springtrap's Revenge VR game in the Fazbear Frights book Bunny Call? Well, not only does he do that, but he also tears the main character Matthew to shreds. Now, some do consider this Matthew to be a reference to MatPat of game theory, and it makes sense why. But what makes this bad is that the community considers this an M-Preg fanfiction, which I have to say, I enjoyed not knowing what that was until I had to ask my sister about it because it was everywhere online. She's really into fanfiction, it's kinda concerning. Anyway, basically Matthew in this story gets implanted with a baby Springtrap thanks to a program called itsaboy.exe, which literally ends up tearing him to shreds from the inside out. Hardly a fun experience, I would say. Yet some women go their whole lives wanting to give birth and have kids. But I mean, at least most of the time, they don't kill you from the inside out. Or rather, they don't usually claw at you and dig through your stomach. That's exclusive to Springtrap. I hope. And at 4, Mic Trap. The Mic Trap theory came out after Sister Location's secret ending, where Michael makes his speech with the famous line of "I'm going to come find you." After saying "I'm going to come find you" a second time, Springtrap appears at the burnt down Fazbear Fright. This one little moment caused some fans to assume that Springtrap appearing meant that it was Springtrap who was talking, making them think that Mike was in fact the one in the Springtrap suit. Hence the name Mic Trap. This, however, was simply to illustrate that Springtrap survived the fire, like we had been assuming, since Scott said in a Reddit or Steam post to check out MatPat's conclusion on this debate, and MatPat had concluded that it was William in the Springtrap suit. Since in FNAF 2's minigames he was able to drive, and if he was Michael, we couldn't have been him in sister location. It wouldn't make sense. But that wouldn't be the end of the mic trap debate. Haha, just wait until the next game comes out. Getting close to the end in number 3, Springtrap and Baby. This is even worse than the Michael one, because not only is Springtrap again the father of the girl possessing Baby and the direct cause of her death, but this girl is also knee-high to a grasshopper at the time of her death. Do you realize how absolutely disgusting that is? When I looked up Springtrap X, as I was doing for most of these numbers, this is one of the first ones that came up. And you know what? That's just wrong. This is shameful. It's even worse than the Michael one. I'm not even joking. Who on God's green earth thought that this was a good idea? And before you defend yourself saying it's the character of Baby, firstly, William designed Baby to appeal to his daughter. Secondly, the only version of the Baby character that we know of is the one that Elizabeth is possessing. I feel like everyone who ships this needs a long, hard talk with Chris Hansen and that Russian guy on TikTok who is catfishing adults with a 14-year-old profile and then scaring them so bad they never did it again. Like, holy sweet Jesus, this is messed up. This is one of the 2 things that I hate the most in the world, and I don't even want to think about how people can actually be shipping this for real. So we're moving on. That's not my, I'm mad about this. I'm mad. Penultimately in at number 2, Spring vs. Scrap. Then Ultimate Custom Night came out, and the Mike vs. Wool Trap debate was on the rise again, thanks to the introduction of Scrap Trap, who people thought was Scott adding a new character so that both AFTON men could be Springlock victims. This was incredibly frustrating for me, but it was ironed out when Scott referred everyone to MapAt's conclusion on the debate, like I said before, cause you know. And in Ultimate Custom Night, Scrap Trap says, "I always come back," which turns into William's signature line because let's be honest, he does always come back. So that seemingly settled it, but there are for some reason still fans who believe that Springtrap and or Scrap Trap is still Michael, which just boggles my mind. But when people are dead set on something, you can't really convince them otherwise, just like how you can't convince me that Mike isn't a robot, even though in this debate there is confirmation that Spring and Scrap Trap are William, but hey. Finally, in at number 1, Survive x2. William surviving the FNAF 6 fire though was much harder to believe when it came out at first, at least before Bunny Call was released. However, some fans seem to note that during the final cutscene of FNAF 6 during Henry's speech, while the other animatronics were engulfed by flames, Scrap Trap was ahead of them.
There's more waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend.
This was especially hard to believe given that we thought Ultimate Custom Night took place in hell, which is really impossible to go to unless you die. Well, with me being the exception. I party with Satan on the regular. He strangely can't hold his liquor. Either way, this was all proven to be true when Bunny Call was released and William was in the hospital in room 1280, which I have to say has got to be one of the biggest trolls in the entire series, or like at least like one of them. Because like, come on Scott, really? You had to do that to me? To us? Yeah, thank you, Scott. Huh. And at 9, it's a suit. While the Springtrap suit contains William's body, it is still a suit. The Golden Bunny animatronic was a Springlock suit, which as Phone Guide tells us is a specially designed suit that doubles as both animatronic and suit. Meaning that the Springlock mechanics in the Golden Bunny suit would retract like some form of even more complex Iron Man and create enough room for a person to climb inside and wear like your normal Chuck E. Cheese suit. Obviously, they weren't amazingly designed since there were some flaws. Like when they get wet, the spring locks can close easily, which is why Michael got bit in FNAF 4 and why William got snapped while in the suit. The suit also is clearly meant to be a suit since it has 5 fingers and 5 toes, which the other suits are lacking in favor of 4 fingers and 3 toes. It's even more clear when looking at the secret menu screens for FNAF 3, where on rare occasions you can see a skinless William Afton trying to get out of the suit by prying the head open. Yeah, it's weird. And at 8, secret room. All Freddy Fazbear locations had a secret room, a room that was secret because it was invisible to the animatronics, meaning that while every other room was programmed into their pathfinding, this room wasn't, and because it was never mentioned to any customer. Only employees that were around before they sealed them up. Why did they seal up these rooms? Because William Afton was stuck inside one, and if they just closed the one, that would look kinda suspicious. Use switching in the Spring Bonnie suit. This is seen in the FNAF 3 final minigame where we see William run into the suit and then collapse. This is the safe room as indicated by the fact that the Shadow Freddy can find it, but you as an animatronic are physically unable to enter because your pathfinding does not allow it. William uses this to hide inside and then dismantle you as you try to find him, but he ends up unintentionally releasing the spirits of the children he killed. After he gets snapped in the suit, they fade away, but are only really put to rest when you get the good ending and give Golden Freddy the party she wanted, even if it's not enough for her to let go, which is kinda salty. I mean, like, it must have been a really bad cake. Come on, puppet. Chop chop. And at 7, Scorched Springtrap. Scorched Springtrap is different than its canon counterpart from FNAF AR. Scorched Springtrap in essence looks like a phantom version of Springtrap, like as if it was a hallucination in FNAF 3. Basically a burnt version of Springtrap after the fire at Fazbear Frights. Speaking of which, it looks like they just showed up across the street, because there's fire trucks over there. But I'm sure you're seeing it, so you know what I mean. Sure, normal Springtrap is pretty spooky, but this guy just takes it one step further and really messes with your head. It's ironic, given how you can actually see Springtrap on multiple cameras in FNAF 3 as another hallucination. So, Scorched Springtrap looking like a phantom makes sense. And at 6, no clear motive. We know that William Afton is the purple guy and that he is the Springtrap and that he is the killer, but what we don't know for sure is why. We know his boy gets chomped and then he sets out to put him back together as a robot, but he was killing kids before that even happened. What we don't know is why he's doing it. We know he sets out to create more Remnant in an effort to unlock the secrets to eternal life or something like that after he discovers Remnant, but why did he start killing kids in the first place? Did one act like Braith and just really piss him off? Was it just something he wanted to try? Is it some weird fetish? He clearly feels emotion since he felt sad after losing his son, sad enough to block out the woman Ballora represents from his life, but we don't know 100% why he killed Susie in the first place. Do you have any theories? Do you have any idea why he could have done it? Let me know in the comments, because figuring this one out may be the key to solving the rest of the lore that we haven't really figured out already. Halfway through into number 5, Final Nights. 2 words. Kill me. I don't want to deal with this thing, so if I'm ever in a situation where I come into contact with this thing, be it virtual or in the real world somehow, I'm going to tell it to kill me. Because no. Just no. This thing is horrifying, and there is only one real image of it. The suit over the exoskeleton is even more torn and tattered, and the glowing dots for eyes make it not any better. My pants are now the color of this animatronic because of it. How does William even have glowing dots for eyes? Like, shouldn't he just have normal eyes? Because he's still human. I'm so confused. Look, this thing could find me in broad daylight with a million people around it and be frozen still, and I still wouldn't mess with it. This thing looks crazy. Why is Final Nights so goddamn terrifying? It scares me with the Reaper puppet, and it scares me with its version of Springtrap. I don't know if it's just an Easter egg or an actual antagonist, but I don't plan on sticking around to find out. And at 4, Scraptrap. Scraptrap is the same as Springtrap. Pink guy is purple guy, is Springtrap, is Scraptrap, is William Afton. There's an entirely separate debate online that is along the lines of William is Springtrap but Michael is Scraptrap or something like that, and it's just ridiculous. Why would that be true? The only Spring Bonnie suit we know of is the one that William was inside before the events of Pizzeria Simulator. For those of you who don't know, Scraptrap is the version of Springtrap you find outside of the pizzeria in the back alley, like where you find Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, and Lefty. And in accordance to paragraph 4, you bring it inside so that when the pizzeria burns at the end of the week, everyone who needed to be set free with fire, since that's the only way to destroy remnants, can be set free. Scraptrap is just a further decayed version of Springtrap. It's not a separate character, it's not its own thing, it's not Michael or anyone new. It's Springtrap, it's William. They are all one and the same. Getting close to the end in number 3, Daylight Springtrap. Daylight Springtrap is a version of Springtrap fan-made as a proposition for Dead by Daylight, a popular multiplayer survival horror where you play as either one of the survivors or the killer. The killer has options between the look and class of the killer, and this creation was a proposition for the game to add a Springtrap character, which would require a load of licensing fees, but we'll pretend like it would be possible. This thing would scare the living hell out of me in either game. It's just horrific. Just the horrific nature of these creations makes me sick to my stomach. There are multiple versions of this animatronic, and they all just make me feel like I'm going to suffer. Some may say just to add the normal Springtrap animatronic, but I'm not sure. What do you think? Would you like to see a Springtrap killer in Dead by Daylight? And if you did, would you want a unique design or the original Springtrap that we all know and love? Be sure you let me know in the comments. And 2 names. Springtrap has gone by many names, some being before the name was known, like when the Five Nights 3 trailer came out, some being just simple mistakes. However, they all existed, and technically you could also say that Springtrap went by all the names that Purple Guy did since they're the same person, but I'm going to ignore that. Springtrap has also been known as, well, Springtrap, William Afton, Michael Afton, Scraptrap, Spring Bonnie, Golden Bonnie, and most interestingly, Hybrid. This name was brought on when the trailer for Five Nights 3 was released, and technically it was right. The fans assumed that Hybrid was in fact a hybrid of all the toy animatronics which he used to build himself, which could have been the inspiration for creation from The Joy of Creation. But in fact, Springtrap is just a hybrid of human and animatronic suit, not being entirely one or the other, hence why I refused to put him in the scariest animatronics list, especially since I don't really find him that scary. But Amanda put him on when she took apart, but despite that, I still stand by my viewing. I stand by my reasoning, okay? He's not entirely an animatronic. He's still in the suit. We never see him die. Finally, in at number 1, oldie but a goodie. This suit is one hell of an old suit, not to mention how long William was stuck inside it, but this suit dates back all the way to Fredbear's Family Diner, which is crazy, and even if they had this technology when that diner was prominent, that makes me even more concerned about how this thing was Iron Man levels of advanced. And while the decay on Springtrap makes that evident, it confuses me as to how it started to break down when Golden Freddy, a spring lock that is as old if not older than Spring Bonnie, seems fine in the first game. I think it's because those holes and rips were in fact made by William when he was trying to escape the suit. We see him trying to pry off the head, so it would make sense why he would have torn off bits of fur or even removed the whole foot in an effort to be set free. What do you guys think about the Springtrap decay? Let me know your thoughts down below. And 10, Spring Bonnie. Spring Bonnie, while being canon in the main series, has only been showed in 8-bit cutscenes. It very well could have just been an animatronic too. But looking up Spring Bonnie on Google Images actually is pretty creepy for something that's only been in 8-bit and supposed to not be scary, since it's just an animatronic with an exoskeleton, or exosuit. For some reason, I find this more unsettling than the normal Springtrap. Maybe because I've been looking at normal Springtrap for so long that I've just gotten used to it? I don't know. The look of the completed and pristine Springtrap just puts me on edge for some reason. Maybe it's Maybelline, maybe it's because I think I'll be the next victim. Either way, Spring Bonnie is scary. I was gonna make a joke like Spring Bonnie is spring scary, but it didn't work. I don't know why I thought of it. And a 9, Draw Kill. This Springtrap was drawn in the style of Draw Kill. At least that's what the image said. I was unable to find the original author since the 3 versions of this that showed up were small and Pinterest links that didn't give any credit, so that's unfortunate. But this thing sets me on edge. And not only this, but searching Draw Kill Springtrap on Google will get you a load of monstrosities that will haunt your nightmares for the next few weeks. I'm not quite sure what it is about this animatronic that makes it so creepy. I just know that it's creeping the hell out of me. Why does this misfortune continue? And at 8, Toy Springtrap. Toy Springtrap is what it sounds like. Springtrap in the form of Toy Bonnie instead of Golden Bonnie. Well, actually, Golden Toy Bonnie. This is creepy as hell. Can you imagine being stuck inside a toy animatronic? Like, obviously I'd like to be stuck inside Toy Chica, but not for so long that the parts of plastic start coming apart and deteriorating and my flesh starts melting and rotting away. Yeah, I don't like the thought of that, and yet here we are with Toy Springtrap and it hurts my feelings. Like on a deep level. Like, at least they didn't do this to Chica, otherwise I think I would be crying on camera, and the editors would leave it in because they like to watch me suffer, just like the rest of you do. And at 7, No Head.
So no head?
The suit doesn't have an endoskeleton head, get your mind out of the gutter. It's actually impossible for it too, since even with the crazy advanced tech that these places have, you cannot move an endoskeleton head as they are presented in the games away enough for a normal head that just barely fits inside to fit inside. This is also shown in the menu screens when William is trying to remove the Springtrap head. There is no form of robotic head present. It's his eyes and his meat. How on earth would the face operate in the Springlock suit if there was no proper head? Is it just a different form of robot or like a different arrangement of parts to get everything working more efficiently? Because if that's the case, why isn't that the case with every animatronic? If it costs the company less to manufacture, I'm sure William would be fine with it if not encourage it, since he gets his daily fill of child murder and he saves a little bit of money on the side, so might as well. Well, maybe it's more expensive, but if that's the case, I'm sure it's easier to just make a separate suit than paying extra for a specially designed suit that doubles as both animatronic and suits. Like, just make a separate one. You can still kill kids in it. And it's 6, Nightmare Springtrap. We all love the Nightmare animatronics. They're some of the scariest things in the games that we've seen. But Springtrap was missing from the bunch, obviously, since this would have been before Springtrap was a thing, at least in the timeline-wise. And William caused the hallucinations anyway. But the fan versions of Nightmare Springtrap are some horrific With the famous stomach mouth and razor sharp munchers, this guy will eat your arm and left testicle for breakfast and then come back for seconds. And then will finish you off for lunch, then regurgitate you again come dinner. But you're also forced to deal with this cycle every day. And it's still you every day. You just somehow come back to life so he can eat you again. I don't know where this analogy came from. Like, I'm not okay. FNAF has actually broken me. And at 5, Fly lures. He had to lure kids into the back room somehow, right? So dressed in the Spring Bonnie suit, he told kids all sorts of things to get them backstage. We know he told Susie, the girl who would later possess Chica, that he had her dog that was actually still alive, as indicated by the bleeding dog carcass in the Fruity Maze minigame and the whole Chica the high school year scene where she says, "I told them someone ran over his dog," or something like that.
He'll be mine by the end of the day. I just know it. I told him that someone ran over his dog in front of my house.
So we know he lies to bring kids backstage, where he ends up killing them for, at this point, unknown reasons. Stuffs the bodies into the animatronics to hide them and then leaves like nothing happened. It's like that meme where Pennywise is talking to Georgie and he's like, "I have brand new Pokemon cards down here." And then Georgie crawls in. Like, you know the one? For me it would be something like, "I have information about Stephen Amell returning as the Green Arrow down here." Or like I once made one that said, "I have all the other Pokemon you can't get in Sword and Shield down here." And that one would honestly get me. Pokemon is the one game that shouldn't need a DLC, okay? Forgot this was a FNAF list. And for Springtrap Endo. What would Springtrap look like without an exosuit? Without the stuff that actually makes him look like Springtrap. A monster comprised of human flesh and gore and some metal thrown in. Yeah, Springtrap Endo is the endoskeleton of Springtrap with William Afton still connected. Not only does that sound painful as hell, it looks like it. But this thing is so bloody, honestly, a lot of it may be black and white, or something like that. We may not be allowed to show it on YouTube. Well, we probably could show it, but we may get in trouble for doing so. So, watch at your own risk there. YouTube, I said it. Are we okay? Are we good? And 3, Ultimate Custom Night. We can all agree at this point that Ultimate Custom Night takes place in hell, and we play as William Afton dealing with the torture we deserved for killing all those kids, but specifically the one we should not have killed. However, the confusing thing to me is that in Ultimate Custom Night, while we play as William Afton, we can also play against animatronics like Springtrap and Scraptrap, which are indeed versions of us. This is confusing to me, but it makes me wonder. Not about Willie being Springtrap, but about what the mechanics of this are. I suppose it could be that he did indeed create that monster, since he hid in the suit to feel more powerful when confronting the spirits, or perhaps it's because it was made of remnant. Or it could have just been that the characters available are the ones that Afton deemed his greatest failures in his mind. It's even more confusing that in the game code, Scraptrap is referred to as William Afton. Scott. I know you're clarifying that Scraptrap is William, but that throws a whole lot more wrenches into this than there should be for a final game in the original story. Come on. Ultimately, in at number 2, Ignited Springtrap. Ignited Springtrap comes to us from the wonderfully horrific and terrifying world of the Joy of Creation. Ignited Springtrap is what I feel like Springtrap would have been. With no jaw and his horrifying demeanor overall, this guy will make you bricks. I'm not even sorry about the swearing because this one was necessary. Normal Springtrap is bad enough, but crank it up to an 11 and then throw it into the real world and then all of a sudden you get this thing. And if you're unaware, the premise of Joy of Creation is that you play as Scott Cawthon and the animatronics are coming after you in our world. Hence the name Joy of Creation. But we will also be getting a new and improved version of this character thanks to the Fazbear Fanverse initiative. Thanks, Scott. Just makes everything more terrifying. Hooray! Finally, in at number 1, Garvey. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist in Dormitibus. As a human, he was a man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burned to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. Garvey is a extremely grotesque version of Springtrap. The suit on his limbs and body are heavily tattered and shredded, and his organic remains are far more visible than they are for the normal Springtrap. His lower jaw is deformed and broken, which disappears on at least one occasion, showing Garvey's corpse, mouth, and jaw. Cause you know, why the hell not? And Garvey now has an unnatural animalistic stance, walking in all 4 limbs like a spider. His limbs also appear to be snapped in multiple places, alluding to the limbs being bent in unnatural ways, and the fact that his left hand serves as a foot and his left foot serves as a hand? What? He is also much bigger than Springtrap, or any other threat in the game. They were also named before the William Afton name reveal, I'm pretty sure, so this is just a random messed up dude, in at least Dormitibus lore. Yeah, no thank you, not anymore, no, go away.